being. That's one way to put it. So how do we think about
people
that?
have a lot of issues. Look, the world in which we exist, in which our children are going to school and colleges and whatnot, we tend to see things in absolutes and extremes, which is to say that, and these all then become criticisms of something like the founders in the Declaration. Either the world it has to be perfect, and they owned slaves, so therefore they were evil and barbaric and it's terrible. Or, and that leads them to some, a criticism. On the other hand, look, the world, I don't care about any ideals, it's all rough and tumble. They're talking about all this mumbo jumbo stuff that's nonsense, this philosophical, yada, yada, yada. I don't care about that. I don't like them either. But what's going on in the Declaration is this world in which they find themselves, which is really it's kind of in many ways the last vestiges of almost a classical and medieval world. It's not quite completely modern, but there's some modern elements to it, right? They believed in religious toleration, religious liberty, for instance, limited government. But because of that, they're combining these worlds in a way.
Is that the Enlightenment and the medieval world?
Exactly,
exactly.
And so you've got to see it that way. So you're seeing a lot of the whole classical natural law tradition coming out of, say, an Aristotle and a Cicero, which goes through British constitutionalism. But you're overwhelmingly seeing the power of the whole Christian movement, the whole Christian tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition coming from the Hebraic world to the Christian world, affecting that. And then, of course, they're affected by the English Civil Wars and what's going on there. So Locke and Algernon Sidney are important, but it's the mixing of these things which is crucial. But today, we have this sense that, well, slavery was bad, therefore it's all bad in the past, as opposed to understanding that, no, these were men and women who understood what was going on, but they were focused on the world they were in. This notion that you work from the place in which you've been placed. They couldn't get rid of slavery immediately, but they understood it was wrong. They didn't like that they had slavery, but it was a fact on the ground. They tried to put a clause into the Declaration against the slave trade.
Really? I did not know that.
Two colonies said, I'm not going to vote for it if you put it in there.
Only two?
Yes, but enough that means
sure,
it was
not
going to be
unanimous.
The Continental Congress had just a few weeks ago voted against the slave trade. So there are all sorts of evidences that this is a churning debate. There's no evidence that they were doing this in order to preserve slavery. Right. But the politics were difficult. But what did they do? They put in the middle of the Declaration a claim of human equality. Right. And they all knew what that meant. Every one of them knew what that, even the slave owners knew that if you say all men are created equal, slavery is a problem with that. Did it dissolve it immediately? No. Did it ultimately have a civil war? Yes. But look, the cotton gin hadn't been invented yet. The economics of slavery had not developed yet. They're claiming a principle. Their aspirational purposes are very clear. They're going to build a new nation. That nation will be based on equality, which meant consent, which meant all the things that flow out of that. And so I think today when we have this sense of looking back and criticizing because of the past, we're misunderstanding the past. We are all imperfect. We're imperfect today. They were imperfect then. But in the midst of their imperfect world and their imperfect selves, how do they operate? What are their purposes? What are their intentions? Where are they going? Yeah. And if you look at it that way, the Declaration, again, is just a radical, meaning the word radical means going to the root, right? It means going back to the first principle. They were radical in the sense they went back, they rejected monarchy. We don't like George III.
That's a big deal.
They rejected the European traditions, which tended to be aristocratic and monarchical and all those things. We're going to go a different way. We think all men are created equal. Well, that's kind of Lockean, right? Yes. The Enlightenment. But what we overlook is it's Lockean, but even more so, what is it?
Imago Dei?
It's Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, human equality grows out of the Bible, right? We are all created equally in the image of God. And that was a dominant view. So you got to look at it that way. And there's so much baggage we have now when we look at it. I think we miss the forest for the trees.
Wow, so there's so much in that. I think it's fascinating. The Continental Congress voted against slavery, that only 2 colonies would have not joined. I think people, and then also your point that the slavery of that time, while of course atrocious and was what it was not the same massive industry that we think of when we think of the antebellum South.
That's right. That had not happened yet.
Right.
But think of who's our great anti-slavery hero, not the American.
William Wilberforce?
Wilberforce. What was William Wilberforce against?
The slave trade.
The slave trade. The slave trade, that was the most barbaric thing.
Right. And a Christian, strong Methodist. Yeah.
But I mean, that message was having an effect, right? The
And in
Continental
that time,
Congress
he's early 18s.
is the beginnings of the abolitionist movement is an anti-slave trade movement,
Right.
and you're already seeing that play out in the Continental Congress.
Okay. It's the seeds are there.
They're there.
All men are created equal is a kind of poison pill planted in the Declaration.
And that's
for the
exactly
future
how
of slavery.
Lincoln read it. But the other thing that's amazing, that's exactly how Frederick Douglass read it. Frederick Douglass, a former slave, he originally thinks the Constitution, it's a slavery document. I don't like the slavery document because he was following the abolitionist interpretation. Yeah. But what did he do? He read and he read and he discovered that no, actually the Constitution is a freedom document if you understand it in light of the Declaration. And the Declaration is the ring bolt. Why? Because of human equality. And he read it exactly the way Lincoln read it, which I think is the way they read it themselves, which is, we're not going to we can't get rid of slavery right now. We got to found a nation first. Then we got to win a war against the most powerful nation in the world. But setting that aside, we don't like slavery. We'd like to see it go away. We think it actually is going away because it's not going to survive. The economics are not good. It's using up the soil. It's not, right? So we'll do this now and we'll let it play out. That's a defendable position. It's an imperfect position to be in, but it's defendable.
Well, we see everything through a moral lens, but they're seeing it through a political, like the way we might think about the issue of abortion or something. Like, we might be opposed to it, but we have to work within a lot of political realities and legislation, and we want to...
In the world in which we are human beings in an actual reality, that's how we have to think about things. And we do the best we can. We advance the truth wherever and however we can. But, a lot of times if you take the perfect can be the enemy of the good.
And any one individual can't stop slavery. Right? So if you put yourself in the position of any individual founding father, they're doing the best they can. And if they were king, which they're against, then maybe they would get rid of it. Right. But they have to have a nationwide groundswell of
that's right.
desire.
There's gotta be a movement.
Or it's